Welcome to the Mystic Detectives podcast, where we seek to unlock the wonders of the unknown. I'm one of your hosts, Crystal Miller.
And I'm your other host, Andrea Marziano. Hey, Crystal, how are you today?
I am doing okay today. I'm a little annoyed, but other than that, I'm good.
Why are you annoyed?
So I bought a car. Well, actually, Holly bought a car a couple of years ago to tow our trailer to move out to Oklahoma. And it's been fine. We bought a warranty with it, like an extended warranty through a company called Silver Rock. And anyway, long story short, we've had to use the warranty a lot on this car. It's a 2015 Hyundai Santa Fe, and most recently we had to literally replace the entire engine block.
Wow, lucky for warranty. Was it under warranty?
Yes, thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, it was like a $12,000 sitch. Like, which is more than the car's worth, right? Like,
that's what I was wondering.
Great. Anyway, so they had my car for 3 weeks. Replaced the engine. I went and picked it up yesterday. Drove home about 30 minutes, parked it, went out about 2 hours later to run some errands, and my check engine light is blinking, which means it's emergent. Right. And my car is shuddering. So it's jacked.
Maybe it was cold and it was just chilly.
Just chilly, right. So anyway, so I called the mechanic today and they didn't answer the phone.
No.
And for our listeners, it's Tuesday. It's a normal Tuesday. So I'm worried because I'm worried they have caller ID, and because I have an 801 area code, they know it's me. Although, I mean, they got paid for it. So it's not like they had to fight me or anything. They're not trying to collect money from me or anything. But anyway, I'm so frustrated because I haven't had a car for 3 weeks, and I was so excited to have my car again, have some freedom, and I don't have my car again. And now I'm supposed to go to the doctor tomorrow. I'm supposed to get labs tomorrow. I've got prescriptions to pick up, and I have no car.
That's so frustrating. This is when you talk about the default world. This is definitely when we don't want to be in the default world, right?
So true. So true. So annoying.
Well, I'm sorry you're having a hard time. That is no fun at all.
Yeah, concur. Hopefully they answer tomorrow or call me back. I did leave a message. But anyway, that's what I can't speak English. That's what's on my mind.
Wow. Well, maybe we could talk about something more fun. So what do you have for us today, Crystal?
Well, I thought that it might be fun to talk about the phenomenon of deja vu.
Wow. I have a feeling we've talked about this before. I know. I have so many dad jokes and not even a dad.
So what do you know about deja vu, if anything?
Oh my golly. I know what my personal experiences have been, where I'm in a situation or a place where I feel like I've been there or done the same thing. And there's been so many times where it was just weird because I felt like I was redoing something. And sometimes I feel like I know what the outcome is because I feel like I've already done it. Other times I just feel like all of a sudden something reminds me of a thing I've done, a place, a feeling, a song, something like that.
Yeah. Have you ever had an experience where you're like, oh, deja vu, and then you're like, wow, it's still going. It's still going. This is still part of it.
Yes, totally. And it almost feels like I don't know where this moment is. And as you say, the default world is like, right. I don't understand. Yeah. And I haven't had it where it's been a negative thing. I've only had it where it's like, oh my goodness, I've done this. And then I wonder, right. And then I wonder if my planes are intersecting at that moment.
Yeah. So, deja vu is a French term meaning already seen, and it refers to the eerie sensation of having experienced a present situation before. And I don't know if you know this, but deja vu is actually an umbrella term for specific dejas, if you will.
Deja is what?
Deja is seen.
Okay.
Sorry, deja is already, vu is seen. And then we've got, so there are different forms of deja vu, including deja vécu, which is already experienced, deja senti, which is already felt, and
Mhm.
Deja Visite, which is already visited. Now, I don't speak French. I hope that I did not butcher those too much. But anyway, I thought that was really interesting. An umbrella term is for more specific terms.
That's funny. It reminds me of the clairs, the different
Yeah,
clairs.
yeah. That was actually the same thought I had when I was researching this. Like, that's exactly how I felt. I was like, this is like, clairvoyant, clairsentient, audient.
Audience. Yeah, that's right.
Is
Audience.
it
Would
audient?
you
Oh,
say audience? Yeah.
no, I
I
said
thought,
audient. Then I got
yeah,
scared that it was auditory.
right. No, no. And that's correct. And I wonder if it feels like they overlap because I will sense something or see something or feel something. And I feel like those clairs are what I'm using. And I wonder if people who have more in tune clairs feel this deja vu experience more than others.
I wonder. That's an interesting thought. On a little bit of a tangent, just
What?
tell you so,
Wait, audience, Crystal is going on a tangent. What are the odds? What are the odds?
so
I love the tangents. Go
I
ahead.
I love AI, and I may change my story sometime in the future, but right now I love it. I think it's
Mhm,
super fun. And so I do use Chat GPT to do some of my research for
mhm,
our subjects when we're not doing interviews. And yesterday I was doing some research on people experiencing homelessness and like the homelessness crisis in the United States,
mhm,
particularly because there's some people in my community on our community Facebook page being dicks about it and just being
mm.
like clean up the streets and they should take care of themselves and they should all live together. They could pay rent if all of them paid some of it. Anyway, long story short, I was
Yeah,
looking up
yeah,
some statistics to
right.
to fire back at them because I was mad. And and it was cool and whatever. And I felt good. And I was like, first of all, please don't talk about people as though they're effing litter because they're
Right,
not. They're
right.
people.
Mhm,
Oh, and I had
mhm,
these classic responses of like, I've talked to homeless people and they choose it. And I'm like, okay, first of all, when you talked, air quoting, when you talked to these people and they said they choose it, did you offer them a home to see if
mhm,
maybe they would rather that? Or
right.
is maybe there a sense of pride or, avoiding a bruised ego by saying they choose it, right? Like
Mhm,
that's just I actually use the I use the comparison. I was trying to be politically correct. So I use the comparison, I asked 3 kindergartners if they like bananas and they all do. So kindergartners like bananas. Like
Every single one.
come on, man. Like that's
Yeah.
not how it works. Anyway, to my point, so when I
Yes.
was doing the research for today for our podcast on Deja Vu, I had asked for some references for citations, right? And it gave me pretty accurate Deja Vu information, but all of the
Mhm.
citations are for homelessness. They're not related to the subject at all.
What? What?
All of the citations are for homelessness.
That's weird.
So they cited all this stuff that they gave me the homeless information for after sentences about Deja Vu.
That's very
So that's
strange.
our fine listeners. That's one way that AI can screw up.
Yeah, being totally unrelated or having arms with hands on both ends.
Right,
Um,
right.
so recent thing you sent me. So what else do you know about deja vu besides homeless references, which is odd?
Weird. So there's actually a kind of a push-pull tug of war when it comes to deja vu between the scientific community and the mystical community, we'll call it, just because we're the
Mhm.
mystic detectives.
Right.
And so scientists like to, there are two, well, there may be more than two, but no, I was given two theories that are psychological theories. And one theory is that it's just a memory mismatch. Deja vu occurs due to a glitch in the brain's memory system, causing it to mistake the present for a past experience.
Wait,
Now,
wait, back up. Hold on. What? So
I know
how
exactly.
how
So
did it
to me,
say?
no, it doesn't say.
Oh,
Actually, I may
okay.
have it. I may have it down further in my notes. I
Okay.
did. I did read all of this. I promise. I'm just. What I was going to say is to me, that's a psychological, quote unquote, scientific view of it. But to me, that speaks more to like the idea of um multiple dimensions, maybe like the
Yeah.
multiverse, you know, because it's like how could a memory be mismatched? And I'm not a scientist, I'm not a psychologist. I don't claim any expertise in this, but my personal experience of learning this is like, what? Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean a
Like what I said.
mismatched memory? Right. Like,
Yeah.
so, and to mistake the present for a past experience, like, to me, that says my memory, okay, to me, that says the present's already happened if I'm remembering
Remembering it.
it as something like what? So to me, that didn't
Yeah.
feel very scientific. But
Especially because a lot of times when I have deja vu, it's a place I've literally never been before. And
right. Well, I've got some stories, my friend.
I
I've got some
bet.
stories.
Do we
Another,
want to have more descriptions or do we want to go into
well,
story?
let me just give you the other, sorry, the other theory, and that is a theory of dual processing, suggesting that deja vu happens when the brain processes experiences out of sync. So, but again, that I just don't see how, I don't see how the future can happen in the present and you can remember it, right? Like, I just
Yeah,
think
because it's
that,
almost like future, past, and present are all in the same moment, which
oh,
means
what could that be?
right. And that's the thing. That's when those strings overlap. When you talk about
Hmm.
string theory and stuff, the way
Hmm.
I understand it, which can be totally not it, again, not a mathematician or whoever does the string theory. But the way I understood is sort of that's where things overlap. And it even does it numerically,
Uh-huh.
that these strings overlap. And I just feel like that's what that says.
Yeah, it's just bizarre to me. But
Yeah.
what's also interesting is that they've done some research and in brain scans. I don't know how you brain scan somebody who's having deja vu.
Right.
Maybe there's people who
Do
have
it
it
now.
frequent. I know, right? Maybe there's people that experience it frequently, and so they just put like a Holter, but for your brain. I don't know. A
Right.
Holter,
Sure.
is a continuous heart monitor that you wear for months or whatever. So
At least weeks, yeah, and
at
so they
least,
have
yeah.
a deja vu
A
monitor.
deja
Can you
vu
imagine?
monitor
Here
that
it
you
is, here in
sleep
my
in.
monitor. I have no idea what that could look like,
Yeah,
but anyway,
it's
they
yeah.
studied it
So they
somehow?
studied it, yeah, and they did see that there were changes in the hippocampus.
Hypothalamus?
No,
Oh,
the hippocampus
hippocampus.
and the temporal
Mm,
lobe. And so
gotcha.
what's interesting, and they say that the studies have shown that there's a significant role of both the hippocampus and the temporal lobe. And so it- you know, again, I don't know how you study deja vu. I didn't look into it because we're not here for the science of it, frankly.
Yes, we are.
I
Let
mean,
us
we
know.
are, but um, anyway, so it's just really interesting to me, and where the mystical society comes in, society, mystical community, where the
The
mystical
community,
community
yeah.
comes in, is they typically tend to believe that deja vu um, is like messages from a past life, or the ability to see the future, those sort of things. And uh, often the theory is that the theory is one of reincarnation, where
Mm.
your soul retains these memories. But i I find that also an interesting theory, because if it were a reincarnation situation in my mind, then I wouldn't be having this experience here, right? Because I wouldn't be Crystal Miller in my past life.
Yeah, you would have been, I don't know, a, eagle, a
Well,
slug, a
yeah.
tuna fish,
So
I don't know.
yeah.
How do we
So
know? Hmm. I feel more like it's a dimensional crossing because to me, like you said, if I were reincarnated, I know that the belief, well, I don't know, but I understand that the belief of reincarnation is a progressive thing. So
uh-huh.
maybe I was a snail and then I turned into whatever is next.
Mhm.
And and so if that's the case, the struggle I have with it sounds maybe similar to what you're saying is, was I here? Was I somewhere
Right.
else? I mean, I don't. most of the most of the deja vu, most of the times I've been reincarnated, deja vu situations I've had have been as I was thinking, kind of an emotional thing. And when we think about the temporal lobe, that's where emotions and feelings and perceptions come in.
Mhm.
And so that makes sense to me that the temporal lobe might be fired up during an image. I wonder if when they did the study, they studied people who were remembering their deja vu experience. Maybe that's how they could see where it lit up,
Maybe.
because that makes a little more sense to me than saying on demand deja vu, please. I mean, how could a person even do that?
I
Okay,
don't know.
deja vu, now, go. It's
Go.
like I feel like it's the ninja, or what is it, the Ninja Turtles or whatever it is, and they do their superpowers all of a sudden. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, deja vu power and ignite or whatever it is. But that's interesting. Did your information show you how many people have deja vu or how common it is?
It did not. I didn't see anything about how common it is. I didn't really ask, to be honest. I didn't put
Mhm.
that in as a
Mhm.
prompt. But I do have some stories. But I don't want to get into the stories yet because I don't want to. Actually, maybe what we could do, it could be like we could pretend like we're good podcast hosts, and
Let's pretend.
we can intersperse the stories.
I
So
like
that
that.
we're not just telling story after story after story. I think that's a good idea too.
Mhm.
So, there are several cases of where children have had experiences of previous lives,
Mhm.
and they've been like researched and now, okay, I have to do a disclaimer. If any of these were debunked, I'm sorry. I didn't look that up. I just realized that right now, but I'm going to
Yeah,
tell anyway because they're fun.
sure.
So there was a psychiatrist, Dr. Ian Stevenson, and he was actually renowned for his work on children with deja vu, or who claimed to remember past lives. He didn't necessarily claim
Right.
deja vu.
Yeah, yeah.
So first one I'll tell you is about Swarnlata Mishra. And Swarnlata Mishra was born in India in 1948 and began recalling memories of a previous life at the age of 3.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah, Swarnlata claimed she had been a woman named Bia Patak who lived in Kotni, about 100 miles from Swarnlata's home. She provided detailed memories of her previous life's family, house, and personal experiences. So, uh, the verification was when Swarnlata's family visited Katni, her memories were verified. She recognized her former family members, identified the house, and recounted specific incidents that only Bia Patak's family would know. Her
Wow.
accuracy and the level of detail she provided impressed both her family and Stevenson's research team.
That's
There's,
wild.
yep, there's one story. So, going back to just kind of the ideas about deja vu, I talked about a little bit, kind of listed out what in the spiritual or the mystic community people tend to attribute deja vu to, and one of the most prevalent explanations is past life memories. Now, why
Mhm.
that's really prevalent, I don't know, but again, these notable cases that are documented by Dr. Stevenson, with these specific details, tend to lend credence for some people to the idea that deja vu is a remembering of past lives. But again, I mean, I go back to what I was saying before. So, we talk about Swarnlata, I think that was her name, not on that part of the page anymore,
Mhm.
but and she's remembering a past life of somebody who is deceased, who lived in a different part of the world, you know, and remembering all of those details. And again, I'm saying if when I have deja vu, I don't feel like I'm somebody else. I don't feel like I don't feel like I'm remembering something from anywhere other than this experience, this lifetime.
Right, right.
So, I don't, again, and you know what, maybe deja vu is different for different people. You know what I mean? Like, we talk about how our psychic abilities or our mediumship abilities or our whatever, shamanic abilities, et cetera, how they manifest differently, right? So
Sure.
maybe deja vu manifests differently as well.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier, that maybe however a person has developed the different types of gifts might open them to more of that experience.
Yeah.
I feel like too that sometimes the vessel, and in this case that little girl, is part of the experience, because as a 3-year-old, even if her family had prompted her about that, there's no
Mhm.
way, I don't think, that she could remember details, because a 3-year-old doesn't have that kind of memory,
Right.
and that kind of ability to learn. Now, if a 12-year-old, be like, probably not, because they maybe researched it or whatever. But a 3-year-old, and I heard about one story, and maybe it's one that you'll include, is a little boy. I feel like he was in England, and he was 2 or 3, and he knew he was a fighter pilot in World War II.
Yep, I have that one.
Is that on one of them? Let's talk about that
That's
one
one
if
of
you
them.
can go to it.
Sure. Let me scroll down here. So you are talking about James Leininger, sorry.
Mhm.
This one was not documented by Dr. Stevenson, but it aligns with his methodology. He was an American boy. He was born in
Mhm.
1998. I actually like that this story is a little more recent. Born in 1998, he began having vivid nightmares about plane crashes at the age of 2.
Right.
So
Yeah.
James claimed he was a World War II pilot named James Houston, who was shot down over Iwo Jima. He provided specific details about his plane, the type of aircraft, and the name of the ship he served on, the Natoma Bay. So James's parents researched and found that all the details he provided matched those of a real World War II pilot named James Houston Jr., who died in 1945.
And they had never even heard of him, so it's not
Right,
like they could have
right.
been coaching him.
Yeah, and the accuracy of James Leininger's recollections, which included identifying his previous life's friends and locations from that period, made this case particularly striking. That was obviously me reading something, but I agree with that, even though it's a silly line. It's very striking, and again, I kind of like that it's more recent. I had heard this. You had heard this story before as well, but it's, I mean, just like a fighter pilot, a World War II pilot. That's a lot of really technical information, describing his
Yeah.
plane and how he flew and all those specific details.
And such a teeny little boy.
Right.
And that's the
Such a
thing that
little
was
boy.
shocking to me. And also something, if I remember when I read this or heard the story, I can't remember if I read it or heard it. There was a piece of something he was looking for. He remembered his coat, and he needed his coat, or he wanted something also out of the experience. And I don't recall. Does it say anything about that in this article you
It
read?
doesn't. Nope.
Yeah.
It does not.
I feel like I remember something about that, but I could be mixing up stories. This is fascinating. And I wonder, my sister, as I think I've mentioned in other podcasts, used to have uh, where we would, one time walking to school, she saw the flag was half mast. I don't know if you remember the story.
Yeah, I do remember.
And yeah, and so one of the teachers had died, and she had seen it in her head. But I don't feel like, maybe that's deja vu. I don't know if that would fall into that
Well,
category.
what's interesting is that's another theory, is that it is
Mhm.
precognition or seeing the future,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Or I think in your sister's case, it wasn't necessarily seeing the future because it had already happened,
Right.
but she was, yeah, I mean, knowing, who knows, man.
Yeah, because really, literally, there was no way she could have known,
Yeah,
because nobody knew until we got to school. Well, I mean, the teachers knew and the principal knew,
right.
but none of us knew, and there was no way she would have heard about it. It was back in the day. It would have been in the, I don't know, 80s,
Yeah,
82 probably, and it's not like we could have hopped on the internet and
right.
checked to see
Sure.
if there were any accidents, and
Sure.
not that we would have anyway, even if we had been able to.
Right.
And so for her to have seen that, and that was her gift that she closed down, as I feel like we've
Right.
talked about. I
Right.
don't remember which episode we talked about it before, but hey, listeners, go listen to all the episodes and you can find it, because they're great. But it was fascinating to me that she had that, and multiple times, even to the point that there was a trip we didn't go on because she had a premonition that it would be dangerous for us. We even said, okay,
Mhm.
we'll reschedule, because we believed it that much, because she had experienced it so much.
Right.
So I don't know if that's a gift along the line of deja vu, or where that would be classified, but it just came up to me in my thoughts at this moment.
Right. It
That's-
kind of goes back to the idea of the multiverse, or the different dimensions. And,
Mhm.
they bring up the parapsychologist J.W. Dunn's theory of serialism, which is that time is not linear and that deja
Mhm.
vu is an overlap of temporal experiences. So I think back to we had a conversation, I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, with our producer, Justin, actually.
Mhm. Mhm.
And he's, if you've listened to our episodes, you know that he's a galactic shaman. And he was talking about how he'd been at we'll have a video episode about it, but they'd been at a ranch that is known for um, paranormal stuff.
Very much.
And very much, yeah, it's not Skinwalker. So those of you who are like, oh, it's Skinwalker Ranch, no, it's not. But if you watch our video episode, then you'll find out.
Season 2 is coming up.
Anyway, so he was talking about how he had kind of Justin, I'm sorry if I butcher this, but this is how I remember it. Maybe Andrea can fill in some holes or correct me or whatever. But he had accidentally kind of invited an experience that he didn't mean to invite, and it was this idea or this invitation for I want to say, I don't think he specified exactly what kind of being, but he said similar to a Wendigo. I think,
And he called it a predator energy.
yeah, he called it predator energy, and he said that he said that he knew that he was on the menu tonight. Basically, I'm totally
Mhm.
paraphrasing. That's not how Justin said it, but and then kind of got into this psychic negotiation with this predator being, and they agreed that the predator would eat a deer instead of Justin. And shortly thereafter, Justin was out just exploring, I think, and came across a deer carcass that absolutely looked like it could have been, you know, clawed at by a Wendigo or whatever this predator uh, entity was. And
Mhm.
we talked about how, with if time is not linear, then it's very possible that even though that deer carcass, it was older, like there was no way it was not a fresh kill. And so we were talking about how that deer may have been put there by Justin, even brought there by Justin, because time's not linear. And so it was, even though it looked like it was older and decaying, it still could have potentially been the deer that was agreed upon with the entity. That was
Mhm.
I'm so sorry, that was kind of a bad retelling, but I just thought it
No,
was
it was
interesting because, like, I do believe, I mean, I to me, that's kind of my theory of deja vu, is that time's not linear.
yeah, and
So,
I feel the strongest about that too, and I believe I was the one who mentioned that if this was a nonlinear experience, that maybe the carcass uh, had a different rate of decomposition as well. It could
right,
even be that simple,
right.
that if they were, the deer and the predator were on a slightly different side of things, or of the line, or however it could be
Uh-huh, yeah,
described,
yeah.
that maybe
That's funny you
that
just
would
said
have.
"of the line" because we're talking about it not being linear.
Uh-huh, I know. Yay for me. And
Awkward.
but but to have that as a different rate of an experience. So
Mhm,
we are just going out here on a wild tangent because we don't know. But it's interesting the way that these things do overlap, or
yeah,
the thread somehow will
yeah,
connect.
yeah.
And I do think about that quite a lot, because I feel like there are just moments in time that just wouldn't make sense to me otherwise.
Yeah, I totally agree. Um, let's tell another story. Some of these
Okay.
are pretty similar, but I don't care. So this one is Imad Elawar. He was born in Lebanon in 1958. He began having past life memories at the age of 2. Imad claimed to be a mechanic named Ibrahim who lived in a neighboring village. He described specific locations, people, and events related to Ibrahim's life. When Dr. Stevenson investigated, Many of Emad's statements match details about Ibrahim, who had died years before Emad was born. Emad's accurate descriptions of Ibrahim's home, workplace, and family members were particularly compelling. So again, a 2-year-old being able to give details of another air quotes person's life, that, like you said, not only could a 2-year-old not remember that on their own if they'd been coached or if they'd been to that village or whatever, but just the fact that it's somebody that was not around when Emad was alive, that it was somebody who'd passed away before he was even born.
What's fascinating to me is the age, because these stories I've heard of these experiences have been for children who were between about 2 and maybe 4. And I wonder if the connection is the fact that they're still completely open to experiences, and they're early enough into their verbal expression that they can express it. But that's the earliest really they could, because a child under 2, I don't feel could express some of these things. And by 4, I think some of these clairs, unless they're worked on, could close down.
Yeah, unless they're nurtured, right.
Right. So that age range is fascinating to me. And I wonder, and maybe you have a story about this, do people who are older note these experiences? Because like I say, I've heard mostly younger people.
I think that most of my let me see if I have any that are older. 4, 3. Nope, mine are all kids.
Yeah. And that's all I've ever heard about with this detail. I hear about a lot of adults having deja vu, and I wonder, but we talk about things that are not super detailed necessarily, and that I used to be a underwater basket weaver. And so I just haven't heard of it. Although I do feel like I remember a story where someone had a head injury and had an experience like that, which actually just brings something up for me. I had a patient one time who had a head injury at their work, and he was very fluent in English and had been so for many, many years, like since he was a small child. But after the head injury, he could literally only speak in his native tongue, which was Spanish from Spain, Spanish.
Oh, wow.
So quite Castilian. And I was able to understand it because I can understand it.
Right.
But he could not, he didn't even know he wasn't speaking in English, because his nurses were trying to help him and they couldn't understand him because they didn't speak Spanish. But when he got a translator, of course, because that's the law, they were able to speak to him, but he didn't understand. Even when he was speaking to someone in Spanish, he didn't understand that he was speaking in Spanish. And it was very fascinating because it had been his language of youth. However, the whole piece of his English learning was just gone for a couple of months. And then as he recovered, the English came back. I wonder, though, if that kind of is in the same brain area. I don't think that language is temporal, though, now that I say that. But I just wonder if that somehow is an overlap too, that one of his areas was closed, and so another one opened, which for him was Spanish. Well, it would be even more interesting if he spoke something he's never spoken before.
Yeah, but that's happened. There are stories.
It has.
There
I've heard
stories
that.
of people who wake up from an injury or an accident or whatever, and they're speaking fluent French. They've never spoken French or been exposed to French in their lives.
Yeah. So where does that come from?
Right. Where does that come from?
Do tell, Crystal.
Okay, well, I'll tell you. I give it up.
Okay, you know it every time. Well, and I just wonder if this is along that sort of a line, because one of those connected memories that came from another life, another universe, another who knows, and dimension. I don't know what all the possibilities are because we just don't. But it makes me wonder if that's kind of along the same line, or sometimes they'll even come back with a totally different personality, including the way they have physical mannerisms, the way that they accomplish things.
And for the record, we're not talking about the typical symptoms of like personality changes with a TBI.
Which is total traumatic brain injury for those.
Traumatic brain injury. We're talking about not that. because
Yeah.
people can have, particularly with a TBI, they can have they can lose control of their emotions and
Sure.
their actions related to those emotions. So somebody who might have been really really gentle before a brain injury might come back and be really really angry or really aggressive or that sort of
Mhm.
thing. So we're not talking about
Yeah.
that. We're talking about
Mm-mm.
somebody who didn't have a brain injury but had something where they were unconscious for a length of time, in a coma, if you will, and then woke up and had this phenomenon happen where
Right.
they could
Right.
speak a language they'd never heard or
Yeah.
never, been exposed to.
That's pretty wild. And just
Crazy.
as I say, the deja vu, what I've heard too about deja vu is that it can come in lots of different forms. Like, say I were to have heard a song, and
Hmm.
all of a sudden I remember being somewhere in a dance club dancing to the song when I'm standing here folding laundry or something like
Uh-huh.
that, where it'll just be not even the same as a memory. It's as if I'm really there again for a second.
Hmm. Interesting.
I mean, that particular experience hasn't happened to me, the dance club thing, but that's what
Yeah.
I came up with as I was thinking.
So, other mystical traditions we can talk about is sometimes deja vu is considered a sign of a spiritual encounter or interactions with other world entities, angels, ghosts, spirits, whatever. Um, in certain shamanic practices, deja vu is interpreted as a moment of heightened awareness where the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds is thinnest. Some believe that spirit guides or ancestors use deja vu to communicate messages or guide individuals on their life paths.
Hmm.
Um, Often people oops, sorry. See, my jaw's spasming. Often people who engage regularly in spiritual practices will will see deja vu as something that has meaning because they practice, finding meaning in synchronicities and unusual experiences.
So could we, I don't know if you have any research on this, but going back to the messages from angels, ho
Uh-huh.
was there any example of that, what that might look like? Because I guess I wonder, I'm thinking back of the times that I've had deja vu experiences, and they've always been sort of just a flash, something that, "Oh gosh, this is familiar." Or I'll walk into a group or have a conversation. It's more often, I think, when I'm having a conversation with someone, actually, that I'm feeling like, "Oh my gosh, we've had this conversation before."
Yeah, yeah, I have definitely had that, and I don't know. It doesn't say anything, and I don't really have. All of my stories are actually about previous lives, which
Mhm, mhm.
um, is interesting actually. But yeah, I've had that same experience where it's like we've had this exact conversation word for word. And it's what's funny to me actually. What's interesting also is when we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, having that experience of like, oh man, deja vu. Oh my gosh, it's still going, right? Like, but what I find in those kind of experiences is that I can't actually predict what's coming. I can't. It's not
Mhm.
like for me anyway. It's not like if I were to stop, I could be like, and if and this is gonna happen, and this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen. It's just that it continues remaining familiar, right? It's just like, what?
Mhm.
Still going, still going. And I feel the same way about like these conversation types of things, right? It's not, I can't, like stop speaking and write down what the person's going to say to me next. Like it's not that sort of a thing, right? It's just this knowing, this familiarity that I mean, it's uncanny, right? And
Mhm.
it really is, it really seems anyway, inexplicable.
Yeah, and I mean, if you and I were talking and it felt like a conversation we've had, it's probably because it's been a conversation we've
Right.
had.
Right.
But these are more because over the years we've had lots of them.
Yes.
But this for me, when it happens with a conversation, it's almost always a new
Yeah.
experience.
Stranger,
Like
right?
I've
Yeah.
never met this
Yeah.
person before.
Yeah.
And I wish I had exact memories of something I could describe because
Yeah.
I would love to look back at it, replay it, and go,
Mhm.
"Okay, was there a message? Was there something?" What
Yeah.
I have found is when I do that, it feels like there's a stronger connection from the get-go with this person.
Right.
And some of them I have relationship with later, but many of them are just random strangers or things like
Yeah.
that I really don't have any kind of further relationship with. Do you
And
know
again,
about that?
same thing I'm saying. I don't, when I'm having that kind of an experience, it's not this experience of you look familiar to me. That's not the experience I'm having when we're talking about deja vu, right? It's just this. So I'm using familiarity again, but it's the familiarity with the situation and with the conversation, not with
The person.
themselves.
Yeah, me too. Me too. However, like I say, if I have a continued relationship with them, it feels like there was a stronger connection just from that get-go.
Just not a familiarity with the person.
Yeah.
And so, one other belief, this is kind of similar, or one other, yeah, I guess belief trail is that that deja vu is actually connection to ancestral spirits or to loved ones that have moved on. And again, that's kind of similar to like angels or whatever, ghosts.
Back in the episode when we interviewed Erin, I believe her name was, where
still is too.
Yes, if that was correct, it is. But she did the hypnotism.
Oh, no, that wasn't
Leah.
Erin. Leah, yes. I think
Leah.
so.
Yeah, so pardon me, Erin and Leah. But when she did the hypnotism with me, I had felt a heaviness. And when I did, she asked me if I could identify if there was another entity with me. And all of a sudden, I knew there was. And we talked a little bit about this in the hypnotism episode. And the person I felt kind of holding me down was a person basically in a prairie outfit. So a pioneer type person, or someone in an that kind of experience. And when I identified her and asked her if she had something she needed, and we talked through it, then she released me. So I don't know if that kind of is part of the cross threads, or if this is something that I had a deja vu experience for, or any of that.
Right.
That was the first time I had a specific, this entity is doing this because she was attempting to protect me from someone who had hurt her. And we wondered if this was a past life. And if it was, does that, as some of these people are talking about, does that cross over to the deja vu part, or was it simply a past life? And again, we go back to, no idea.
It could have been Erin, by the way. I'm looking, and we did interview 2 Erins. So very sorry if we
get the name right or wrong. I mean,
so sorry. We do this a lot, okay?
Yes, just reminded me of it.
Yeah, totally. And again, is there a solid answer? No.
Not from us anyway.
Not for us anyway, yeah. And even from what I can see in my research, like there's like I was saying at the beginning, also there's this push and pull, tug of war going on with science and the mystical community, because there is no definitive answer. And it goes, it goes back also to these stories of these children that are just so compelling. I mean, I know I already said that, but it's interesting that several of these are in the Middle East or East Asia.
But yeah, and I've seen them from all over. And to think that people in so many different places can be having these experiences makes it more of a human experience, not a location experience. And when scientists cannot prove that something isn't a thing, but they do see some changes, I can see how, like many of the mystic topics, it just can't be explained. But there's enough evidence that it's a thing, and we can't ignore it. So I wonder if you have anything in your research about, is there a way that we can build our ability to have deja vu or tap into that skill at all?
Nothing that I found. And again, that goes back to what we were joking about, but like testing, testing deja vu, because there really has been no indication that you can say deja vu on, right? Like deja vu now, let's do it. And so, there may be people in our audience that have an answer to that question that's different, that, that do have tricks and strategies or whatever. And if you do, I mean, please write into us, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. But yeah, I didn't find anything. It's interesting too. I've got another story that's also World War II.
What's that?
This is Chase Bowman from West Virginia, and he started talking about his past life when he was around 3 years old. He claimed to be a soldier in a previous life. He described being killed in a battle during World War II. He provided specific details about the war, his experiences as a soldier, and the place where he died. So his parents were initially skeptical and didn't want to even give it any credence, but he persisted, so they decided to look into it. And through their research, they found that it's interesting, actually. This says they found that many of Chase's descriptions matched the life and experiences of a soldier who had died during World War II in Europe. It makes me wonder if some didn't.
Yeah.
But anyway, once again, there were details and accurate descriptions of military life from that time period that Chase would have had no way of knowing.
Right.
With it, at that level of detail. I mean, unless he was, 2 years old watching I can't think of the name of the movie.
History Channel.
No, I'm thinking of the movie with Patton. Watching Patton, right?
Yeah, totally. And then his recall would be amazing.
Yeah,
well, and
exactly.
I think about it too. When my children were younger, I definitely did not stand around teaching them history.
Right.
And so even the things I did attempt to teach, they had to be over and over again, because most typical kids are not going to remember, especially at that age, all those fine details. So I wonder if a person is in more of a meditative state, or in some of the areas that we know that there's more mystic or psychic activity. I wonder if being in those spaces increases the likelihood.
I wonder.
It seems like if a feature, experience, talent, I'm not sure what to call it, is heightened.
Oh yeah.
Then if a person is just open more to whatever it is, because I know there's been times where I've been open more to things generally of the spirit realm when I am in a place that is more connected potentially with spirit, or even for me, being around water and trees and things like that will open my clairs up more.
Sure.
And I just, like I say, I just wonder if that would increase the likelihood of these deja vu experiences. I'll have to get into a meditative state and wander around and see what happens. Oh, this looks familiar. Oh, which a lot of things are familiar here, so it could be anything. So, do you have any other stories?
I do, and I was just going to say, what's interesting is there are stories of adults, but the reason that they're not often shared is because people tend to they tend to attribute it to fraud, frankly, like somebody just doing research and then claiming to have these memories.
Sure.
They're much harder to verify than a child who couldn't possibly, know these things, right? So they
absolutely
chalk it up to past memory or whatever. But I've got one that's a little bit different, and it's from my current home state. So Ryan Hammonds was born in Oklahoma, and he began having past life memories at the age of 4. Ryan started having vivid nightmares and began talking about a previous life in Hollywood. He claimed to have been a movie actor and provided specific details about his life, including the names of people, locations, and events related to his past life. Ryan's mother did some research based on the details and discovered that many of the things he said matched the life of Marty Martin, a Hollywood agent and actor who had died in 1964. Notable details included Marty Martin's work in the movie industry, his role as an agent, and specific incidents from his life. Dr. Jim Tucker, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia, investigated and confirmed many of the details that Ryan provided were accurate, even ones that were not widely known. Wow. So again, with these kids, okay, so I was just thinking, I was talking about them having this, watching Patton all day for
sure
3 years straight, right? Right. And so, of course, somebody may say, well, there are children who at 3 years old, could do advanced math problems and stuff like that. And so maybe one would,
They're
I should
just
say, just
a
chalk it up
savant.
to savant, right? To
Mhm.
savantism. I don't know how you say that, but and there's nothing. I didn't find anything to indicate that any of these children that had these experiences were particularly more intelligent than their peers.
Yeah, I've never seen that. One thing, maybe, I don't know if you have another story that we're going to go on with, but one thing I was wondering is, do these things fade for these children? I mean, I hear about them when they're 2 or 3, but I wonder if they hold on to it.
My understanding is that they do. I can't remember with James Leininger. I I seem to remember that it didn't with him, but I also I can't say that for certain. But typically, they kind of just grow out of it. Is what I found. Just becomes a thing, and that's when they start to get biases and they start to feel peer pressure and influence and wanting to please and all of that sort of thing, right? And maybe they don't want the attention. Like, I don't, everybody wants to talk to me and I have to go on Ellen and whatever, right? I don't want
Right.
to, sort of
Yeah.
thing. But
Well, and I also wonder too if they've given whatever message they get to give, if it's complete. Yeah, because I mean, I've heard of these stories, like I say, of the small children, but I've
well,
never
I have
heard
one
of
of an
one
adult
later.
I have one as an adult that I kind of, um, like. And I know
Mhm.
I said I didn't have any for adults earlier on in the podcast, but I found some while we were talking. So there.
Awesome.
So Dorothy Eady was born in 1904 in London. She claimed to have
Mhm.
memories of a past life as a priestess in ancient Egypt. Dorothy claimed she was a temple maiden named, wow, Ben Treshit, who lived in
Mm.
ancient Egypt. She provided detailed knowledge of ancient Egyptian customs, rituals, and the layout of the Temple of Seti I in Abydos, which was not well documented at the time. I've actually heard this story, I just realized. When Dorothy moved to Egypt, her extensive knowledge of the Temple of Seti I, its hidden chambers, and specific historical details that had not yet been discovered by archaeologists astonished experts. Many of her
Huh.
insights were later confirmed by archaeological findings, lending credibility to her claims of having lived a past life in ancient Egypt.
That's wild.
Yeah.
She got to live in ancient Egypt as a priestess, and I was a pioneer girl. What's that about?
Right?
I know. I always wanted to be a princess, but I didn't have any memories of that yet. Maybe one day.
Oh, see, here's one that actually started as a child and then did move into adulthood. So
Mhm.
this is Shanti Devi, was born in Delhi, India in 1926. She began speaking of a past life at the age of 4, but her case continued to be discussed and investigated into her adulthood. She claimed to be Lugdi Devi, a woman who had lived in Mathura and died shortly after childbirth. She provided detailed information about her former husband, family, and life events. Mahatma Gandhi became interested in Shanti's case and set up a commission to investigate her claims. The commission
Mm.
confirmed many of the details Shanti provided, including recognizing people and places in Mathura that she had never visited in her current life. The case remained, oh my gosh, this is so unimaginative, Chat GPT. The case
Mhm.
remained, what do you think? Compelling, even as Shanti Devi
Compelling.
grew older.
It does. Well, and the fact that Gandhi was interested in it was something that I am surprised by. And that even, well, I guess because I'm in India, that he
Yeah,
heard about it, but to have these details of these lives is just so crazy. I mean,
it
it's
is.
just,
It
I don't
is.
know,
It really is.
to have it available. And I just still really wonder the message. Is it
Right.
just to let us know that there's more going on than we see? Because many of us believe that that's true,
Right.
that
Right.
there's more going on. And there's times that there's just no way I could say otherwise, having
Yeah.
had so many different types of experiences. And I know everyone I've talked to, I think, has had some sort of deja vu experience, whether it's something that of course not necessarily that I experienced with them, but just something they bring up.
Yeah. Well, and just another tangent, haha. You're talking about only otherworldly or other dimension or other planes or whatever explanations. I had an experience when I was a young adult. I was a new mom to a one year old, and I was single because I was getting divorced. And I had a shitty job that paid shitty wages, and I used to sometimes float checks. Right, it was the only way I was going to get groceries. And one day I needed groceries. I had a baby, I had to feed and clothe and diaper, and I had some cash, and I don't remember the amounts, but let's just say I had $26, right? And I knew that my groceries were going to probably be about 50, so I had decided I would, you know, pay the $26 I had, and then write a check, float a check. And for those of you who are young, I just realized they probably don't know what it means to float a check. It actually means to break the law and write a bad check. However, it's writing a bad check, anticipating that your money will be deposited before the check clears. Because back before our lovely digital world, checks had to manually be mailed to a bank. A person in the bank had to input the check information into their system. Anyway, so it would take several days for a check.
Several days. And yes, listeners, we are elderly.
Yes, we are elderly. But anyway,
not very elderly, a little bit elderly. Anyway, so you went to float a check.
Yeah, so I just decided I would just do. That's what I would do. And the thing that's important to know about this story is I was so stressed out, and I was so devastated. I counted my cash 5 times, just hoping a bill was stuck together or just anything that would make it more than $26, right? And so I got to the grocery store, did my grocery shopping, whatever. Got up to the checkout, and my as expected, my total was around $50. And so I went to get the $26 to pay the portion in cash that I had planned to, and lo and behold, there was enough money to cover my groceries. Now, my wallet had not left my sight. Nobody had touched it, and so anyway, my point being, that was a literal physical manifestation that you can't explain. I mean, I guess you could, if you really wanted to reach, you could say that somebody did some weird sleight of hand, but why would they? They don't know who I am or that I'm struggling, right? But anyway, so that my point in going on this tangent is that one of the reasons that we are mystic detectives is because we do experience a lot of things, and we have peers who experience a lot of things that just cannot be explained by the quote unquote rules of the default world.
Right. Yeah. And there's so many. What I find is, I feel like I kind of mentioned before, is that so many of these things overlap. One experienced deja vu, maybe it's a psychic ability, maybe it's a feeling or another life. And I feel like there's a lot of them that just sort of present the same way or very similarly. And I don't know if anyone has ever done research about the different types of things to see if our brains do light up when we're doing tarot card or when we're doing something like that. So that's, wow, really interesting. And when we go through these things, it's fun to share them, but it's also a little nerve-wracking, isn't it? To go, hey, guess what?
100%. Yeah. It's when I used to do psychic readings, I often would be like, I don't want to say that out loud. Don't make me say that out loud. Because I was so scared. I would get some specific information, and I was so scared. I was so scared of somebody being like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, right?
Right.
And so I would be like, really? A name? A whole last name? But what I found is that when I was brave and I did it, it meant something. So
always.
Yeah, always for me. And but my point is, yeah, it can be scary. That's a vulnerable place to put yourself in, because
Right.
there's a lot of judgment out there, right? I know that there are, well, okay, Doreen Virtue is a great example. She was a long time expert in the metaphysical, mystic, spiritual world. She wrote a lot of books, made a lot of angel cards, things like that.
Hmm.
And she's now born again evangelical Christian, and denounces everything that she ever contributed, and says that, it came from demons. That demons were speaking to her, not angels. And
Hmm.
and so I don't want to purport to know what Doreen Virtue's actual experience was and how she got from where she was to where she is now. But I can say that it again, it makes you really vulnerable. It makes a person really vulnerable to say, I can speak to the dead. I don't know. I mean, you know what I mean? Just like,
Right.
or
Right.
angels speak to me, and then there's also the added stressor, or um, uh, I don't know, thing that makes it scary, of frankly fraudulent people who
Sure.
make all these claims. Many of them start cults, and these cults end up, benefiting only them, because they have
Hmm.
claimed to have these powers, or whatever you want to say, these insights, these connections, whatever. And so that makes it scary too, because I personally would never want to be accused of taking advantage of people with my gift, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, and I feel. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was going to say, but I want to share it, right?
Yeah. Well, and I feel like when people come to people who channel healing energy, I feel like the people who still remember it's not them healing the people coming to them, it's not them giving the
Yeah,
message.
yeah,
So when someone comes to me, it is not me giving the message.
right,
I'm getting it from spirit guides, angels, wherever it
right,
comes from.
right.
And I always tell my clients, this is not for me. And one of the things that when I say it, many, many times, if they ask me later, what did I say? Because they didn't remember, I said, I don't know. It wasn't for me. It
Yeah,
was for you. I was simply the voice. And so the people I feel like who stay into that space of this isn't me, this is a channel, then they stay in the air quote safe zone. I don't know how else to call it.
yeah, yeah,
And serving the good of the person that's come to receive the service
yeah.
versus serving themselves. And I feel like that is the delineation, at least in the way that I've seen it.
People ask me also, that I'm sure you've been asked as well, well, why do you charge money for
Mhm,
energy healing or psychic readings? And my answer is, because without an exchange of some kind,
mhm,
um, the service is not as valuable. And I find that people are more open and more willing to listen and to hear,
mhm,
if they've made some sort of a physical exchange. Now, sometimes,
mhm,
as you well know, it's a trade, right? A massage for a
mhm,
Reiki treatment, or it doesn't have to necessarily be money, but I do find, when I've done free readings, um, I find that it feels, uh, I don't know how to say this without sounding stupid, but it feels more like a joke, I guess,
mhm.
you know?
Yeah, it there's no skin in the game. Yeah, and I believe that's true. That is true.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that I love is talking about these different types of experiences, how different people get psychic gifts or abilities or whatever it is we want to call it, and just to hear the stories of how people have come about
Yeah.
getting to that point.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing the deja vu experience with me.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was fun to research, and I really thought that I got nervous, as you have experienced, that we were going to end up with a 15-minute podcast, but I mean, we got some robust information, which I'm really grateful for, because it was really interesting, and hopefully our listeners also think it's interesting.
Yeah, and one of the things that we invite you to do is to look into our Patreon account that we have now, because you can actually give us topics to work on and be recognized in the episode. That if the topic comes from you, whether it's our episode as a podcast or a video cast. And so we're excited to hear from our audience and build the Patreon as we move along.
Yes. Thank you very much. We love you.
We'd love to hear from our listeners. To leave a comment, share a story, or ask a question, email us at listeners@mysticdetectives.com. You can also find out about our Patreon and other interesting things going on at our website, mysticdetectives.com. As always, we invite you to subscribe, share, and leave reviews to support the podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week. Stay curious
and keep exploring.